How's it going, everyone? I'm Ottengroff, and today on The Untrained Ear, we are going to be going over A Matter of Time by Laufey. Matter of Time is the third studio album by singer-songwriter Laufey. With this album, she really took a move more towards the jazz and pop sound, whereas before she had more of a focus on jazz preservation and a classical jazz sound. I would say that this album is very passionate and spiritually vulnerable, a good sound for sure. And this is orchestrated by a tandem of Laufey's vocal talent as well as her production and writing capability. This is overall also a clear demonstration of her classical training, which all kind of composes together to create what is a very symphonic pop that I believe is very delectable and new in the current scope of things. Her soft vocal style is extremely potent. It seizes your attention. In a lot of ways, it reminds me of Billie Eilish and FKA Twigs in that regard. So we're going to go ahead and break apart just three tracks on this one. There's definitely a lot to like about the track Castle in Hollywood. It has these acoustic guitar rolls that basically serve as the percussive element to the track. There's ambient electric guitar chords that are complemented by these just gorgeous orchestral string elements. And there's also some chiming production elements as well. Overall, you get this very like Taylor Swift vibe. I would say Taylor Swift like in her strongest. Lyrically, this is also a commentary on an ended friendship, which, while Taylor is usually writing about romances and the failures of those, clock's ticking, Travis. This twist and taking things in a more broad scope by focusing in on friendship with this particular track, I thought was a really good move for Laufey, who I think is going to be compared to Taylor a lot on this album. I think overall there's just such a gorgeous dramatic flair to this track. It's very bittersweet from all regards. And so that made it definitely a standout for me. With the track Too Little, Too Late, I think Laufey really explores the concept of an epic ballad and makes some interesting decisions. The ballad opens up very simple with piano chords and Laufey's very silky sweet vocals. And then her vocals start to swell powerfully with more string instruments being introduced as the track kind of progresses. And then during the second verse, you get an injection of some percussion finally. And then the instrumentality, the vocals, everything just continues to swell and pick up as the track progresses. And then there's this really interesting moment at the back where you get a pace pickup and then the track smooths out and it fades into violin. The fascinating thing about this is traditionally with ballads, you have a climax to the ballad and a big grandiose moment. And this track really feels like it's building up to something like that across it. But then you never actually really achieve a full like climactic moment in this track, which is an interesting take on ballad, but really does a good job pairing and representing the lyrical symbolism here. You have a narrator who's talking about a love that never truly blossoms to its full potential, and they're watching as the target of their romance is becoming literally married to another. And the outro here is super emotional. I really love the lyrics. I'll toast outside your wedding day, whisper vows I'll never say to you, because it's too little, all too late. For beginning to end, this is really a romance fairy tale story, but it has the bad ending. And we've seen this plenty of times, especially with, again, I'll mention Taylor Swift. But I think this track really takes that concept and fleshes it out a bit further with the instrumental and production symbolism that is injected across the track. I think it's a fascinating example and a welcome one at that. So, with the track Sabotage, sonically, I think you have this track that truly demonstrates how production and orchestration can enhance the message of a song. You don't just need to do that with lyrics, you can do it with all the elements. And I think Laufey across this album, but especially on Sabotage, really demonstrates this. You start off with very gorgeous piano arpeggios that lull you into this sense of security, like a security blanket almost, with strings sort of as the fibers. And this slowly forebodes a darker shift. Occasionally, you get these juts of horror esque violin injections across the track, which is very ominous feeling. And then it gains overall in orchestration, volume, and depth as the track goes. Laufey's gorgeous vocals are foretelling across this entire piece of how this relationship is doomed to fail. She will sabotage it. And then finally, at the apex of the track, at the very end, you get this eruption of orchestration. You get a discordant choir, you get ominous off key violin tones, which feels very horror. You get drums, which are rarely utilized across this album, but excel here as they rampage over electric guitar. And you can hear sonically the prophecy that Laufey's talking about fulfilled in the track. Like a villain, her own villain, she sabotages yet another relationship. I think this is a gorgeous track with masterful vision and production, easily my favorite and the most memorable on the album. I think the story of how to criticize A Matter of Time lies in some of the smaller pieces kind of adding up to some bigger problems. An example of this would be in Sabotage. There's this, I just talked about this harsh, darker violin piece that comes in at the end. But the mixing here is not quite perfect. And I felt like elements were coming off a little loud, more loud and overpowering compared to some of the other instrumentation that I think was equally as valid and important in the climax of the track. I think you could achieve the same effect without over cranking and volumizing some of the horror-esque elements here. So this is one example, but I found little nitpicks like this across most of the tracks on the album, and I think it attests to the idea that the production here is just falling just a slight bit short of what I'm kind of looking for when I'm looking at an album in 2025, but overall very, very strong. I think when I think about this album, I'm thinking about Taylor Swift reimagined and flushed out in a creative and interesting way. I think that the baseless rating for this album, I would have to say, would be a sleek 7.